Thank you, Austin, for the countdown, and welcome to the work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for August the 24th, 2021. We're going to start out with a roll call. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Alderman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Schroer.
Present.
Alderman Speedy.
Present.
Alderman McClendon is absent. Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
And that you fill out a speaker card there at the center post. And you can give those to somebody up here and they'll get them to me. So I'd urge you to do that promptly. The next item is event permit for Centennial High School Homecoming Parade. Is there any question about that one? None. We'll move on to 2, which is the same thing for Franklin High School Homecoming Parade. Any questions about that one? Hey, Monique McCullough, say hello to everybody in TV land. Yeah, we're glad you're here.
These are the 2 annual homecoming parades that they have every fall.
Great. I think everybody's good with it. We'll keep moving on. Item 3 is continued discussion about the future use and status of a ground lease between the Water Management Department of the City of Franklin and Cheekwood Golf Club for 54.12 acres of city property located along the southern right-of-way of the McHatcher Parkway at its intersection with Spencer Creek. Mr. Stuckey.
Mr. Mayor, we're not in a position to discuss this tonight. We received back a draft lease from the Cheekwood team late last week. It's not in a position to be considered. There's items in it that still need to be addressed and that don't reflect some of our other discussions and versions that have been shared together. So we need to work through that to have something to consider. Plus, we are still waiting for some requested information to help understand the project and the viability of the proposal. So, and that includes, I'll just give you a sense of what we're talking about, their business plan, the financials for Cheekwood, their financing plan, and any agreement that might relate to the Tennessee Golf Foundation. So those are some highlights of information we feel is necessary to have and understand before we're in a position for the board to consider this.
I'm a little frustrated with this item. We've been waiting for some time for various information to be provided to us. Staff's spent a great deal of time on this item, trying to work through it. What I'm going to do tonight hopefully will motivate them to get us the required documents to continue to negotiate this lease, and if not, I'd like to see the end of it. So I'm going to direct our city attorney to draft a resolution for the voting meeting on September the 14th to rescind Resolution 2017-72, which authorized the city administrator to pursue a contractual lease agreement with Cheekwood. Any other comments from the board? We're ready to move on to item 4. Item 4. Consideration of liquor license for HVD Ventures LLC, doing business as the Corner Wine and Spirits. Any question about that one? We'll move on to item 5, which is City of Franklin Contract 2021-0203, a professional services agreement with Los Design for construction administrative services, the Freedom Ball Field subject project in the amount not to exceed $101,500. Any question about that one? Item 6, City of Franklin Contract 2021-0228, utility relocation contract with TDOT for Lewisburg Pike culvert replacement.
TDOT is replacing one of the culverts in front of the eastern flank, the battlefield along Lewisburg Pike. We've had a significant number of culverts that have failed over the years, and when a culvert fails, it then impacts our water line. We typically have a break because that subsurface of the main gets undermined. So TDOT is going in and replacing the culvert, and is doing that. We're going to replace the water line that's right there. We have a capital improvement project down the pike a little bit where we're actually raising that water line down Lewisburg Pike. So this contract is going to just take that small section and raise that water line up so it doesn't get disturbed by the culvert replacement with TDOT. And so this is the emergency contract with TDOT to use the designer that they're doing to do that work.
May,
Go ahead, Alderman Martin.
is this, Michelle, the area where Lewisburg Pike's going to be closed? You know, we talked about this,
For the,
for the work, for
this,
the construction of this.
yes. So this is so I think that, yeah, Paul is working with the total TDOT project. This is just the small water main replacement. Is that what you mean?
Well, we discussed this at CRC at one point, and
Yeah.
where Lewisburg Pike's going to be closed.
The latest revisions of the plans that they show is a full closure and a detour. We have requested, and there is no reason that it cannot be done, a phased approach where they shift the roadway, build one side of the culvert, shift it back and build the other. It's a pretty big traffic impact to our downtown area with Franklin Road under construction. We've highlighted that to TDOT and asked them. They're right now considering options of whether it's worth the additional cost to do a partial closure and keep it open. But right now, it's still to be determined. They're working through the final stages of that, and we'll give you plenty of notice either way they
But
go.
this is the area that we've
Yes, ma'am.
discussed.
Right in front of Eastern Flank.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, item number 7, this is City of Franklin contract number 2021-0218 with the City of Brentwood for an interlocal agreement for provision of sanitary sewer service for 1852 Wilson Pike.
So this is an interlocal with Brentwood. So we have already denied this parcel through the typical, the traditional availability process. The city attorney at Brentwood would like us to have an official document that outlines we are not going to serve this property, and we are going to let Brentwood serve it. So this is, you'll see the resolution is just it's fairly simple. Shauna drafted that up. You already denied this property at CIC. This is just kind of reaffirming that. Brentwood wanted more official paperwork other than our denial letter.
We can handle that.
Yeah, city attorney at Brentwood.
Okay, item 8, which is Resolution 2021-112, a resolution to accept and recommend approval of Amendment 4 to the Comprehensive Transportation Network Plan Major Thoroughfare Plan to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just start with a couple comments to start this off. I did get a call earlier today from Alderman McClendon. His day job has gotten in the way of his ability to attend tonight, both this work session and the voting session. You may recall he had asked for this item to be deferred and placed on the agendas tonight. His specific request deals with the component of the major thoroughfare plan that has an extension of Fieldstone Parkway. And basically, he would like to request consideration for removal of that. But Alderman McClendon also asked that we defer the vote tonight so that he can be here for that ultimate vote. And so what we do tonight, I would like to do tonight is maybe cover some highlights of it again, to just walk you through that, make sure there aren't any other questions or comments you have. But then when it comes to the voting meeting tonight, ask you to defer to the first meeting in September at his request so that he can be part of that vote. But Paul and staff have prepared some things to go over the key points of the amendment to the thoroughfare plan, and it still probably makes sense to do that tonight and see if any other board members have any questions or comments or adjustments that you'd like to see considered. So, Paul?
Okay,
I
I'll
do,
try to be
Mayor.
brief. No,
Paul, did you get my email that I forwarded to you from Julia Short?
I did not. I got it, there was nothing attached to
Yeah.
it, and I got it maybe an hour before.
Okay, well, she just wants to be sure, I want to be sure that what she's talking about is being addressed.
The
No.
email is cut off. It doesn't have anything on it. Oh, yeah. It just has Dear Alderman Martin.
Well, actually,
I can read it to you.
I didn't get one either. I just got what she wrote. I didn't get a map.
We didn't get that, all we got says Dear Alderman
Yes,
Martin.
and I can
And
certainly,
there's nothing else there.
I can certainly follow up with
Yeah.
her.
It's right here.
Please, I'm not going to vote on this until I know that
Yes.
those items are complied with.
Okay, I'll follow up with her after
Thank
this.
you.
Yes, ma'am. So just very high level, and I'm going to try to go quickly, just out of respect of the other items on the agenda, is a summary of the changes are the road network in the West Harpeth area has been updated based on feedback we received from property owners and developers. And essentially, this is the existing major thoroughfare plan. If you go to the next slide, Jonathan. What was requested and told to the staff was they really wanted to go to more low density and that these roadways weren't needed. Our zoning and land use plan doesn't necessarily dictate density levels. And so what we wanted to do was go through an exercise, and we went through that with them, where they spelled out what densities they wanted. And so this is ultimately what they came up with. And based on knowing what those land use densities are, we started feeling comfortable of being able to remove some of those roadways. Next slide, please. In addition, the developers and property owners came up with a network of high-volume local roadways that showed connectivity that they presented to us, and we said that all seemed to make sense, what they're showing. And some of those properties were even requesting to develop in the county. So taking these things into consideration, if you go to the next slide, we were able to essentially eliminate a north-south roadway where we were trying to set up a grid system. At these low densities and traffic numbers, we've determined that those roads can be removed. Again, that's based on the land uses and densities they provided, and we were able to eliminate one east-west connection. We'd still like to, we did receive some feedback that the one road from Hillsborough over to Del Rio Pike, they did want to eliminate that road. And our commitment to them was that would be evaluated in the future when land use is fully determined and they come forward with a development plan. And I've reiterated this multiple times. If it comes in and it's a high density, we may need that bridge over the Harpeth River. But we certainly do not need to build a bridge that is not needed or we do not want to maintain. And so again, a lot of that will come in and be reevaluated as development proceeds.
Can you be more specific
Yeah,
about
I was
which
gonna say,
road
Mr.
we're
Mayor,
taking
yeah.
away? I mean, You know backwards and forwards, but please, I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry, I should have been a little more prepared. So this is a roadway with the lower densities that we felt comfortable removing, and then also this east-west roadway. Now, this is the bridge that goes over the Moore property, and they did not want this roadway. They were very adamant against it. However, our feedback to them was that they try to do more high-density development there. We would like a traffic study to be done and a traffic analysis to be done before we decide to remove it. The infrastructure is directly connected to the land use. And so we would revisit that at the time they're prepared to move forward with development. Does that answer your question?
Yes, do it one more time so I can watch.
And that's the Moore property.
This is the existing plan, and, I'm sorry, yep, the Moore property. We're going to eliminate this road, this
Is that the one
north-south.
by Gentry Farm?
Yes, ma'am. This is the
Thank
one by
you.
Gentry Farm. Gentry Farms is right here, and this east-west. And this is that large county development that's proposing to go at about a unit per 10 acres.
The equestrian one?
The equestrian one, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. So as long as they stick with those really low densities, we see no reason to build these roadways. And again, this east-west connection will be evaluated in the future.
And Paul, would you show on that, the short property, the other one?
So the short property is generally in this vicinity here, and then they own this. And then the Living Field Moore property is up in this
Okay.
area.
Somehow, they think that the road's gonna cut through their property, and I don't think it is.
They have multiple options on what to do, and we've been continuously working with them on it. We said that in our response, this is getting a little bit out of scope, is that this roadway, Old Charlotte, either needs to be improved to help provide that east-west connection. Mac Hatcher's putting a right in, right out here. They either need to keep this roadway improved, or if they choose to try to rework it, we would work with them to reroute that roadway, and we're leaving that option up to them. But the connectivity east-west is definitely something that is required. And even with the proposed development here that's being done by Cliff Smith, they have connections to Old Charlotte as well.
But you're working with them?
We're working with them, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So
And
the
we will
road that
continue.
you're talking about taking off, that goes across what's just not developed now, would be where Del Rio gets to that four-way stop.
Yes, so this is the road that, on the Moore property, that's still going to be subject to a traffic study and a determination. The roads that we're removing are these two right here.
Thank you.
Mr.
Sorry,
Mayor,
Mayor.
may I make a comment?
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
Because we've talked about this. That
I'm sorry,
one
Vice Mayor.
that you're wanting to leave in, right there, you know, that is the floodway whenever it's right at Hillsborough Road. I mean, you would have to build an enormous bridge there. And the whole thing, all the way across there, even though you said it was going to be, what did you say, on the edge of the floodplain, virtually all of that is the floodplain. So it does not appear to me that, I mean, in the long run, you would want to build a bridge as big as the one that they're building on Matt Catcher for this. I mean, it's not, I'm exaggerating, but still, it just doesn't seem that would be a place. And also, the people, let's see, it comes across right out of Monticello there, and I feel sure that the people from Monticello would not want a whole lot of traffic from the east coming through them to hit on that. And of course, I don't know what, I mean, I know you would be waiting to see what any kind of development is proposed anywhere, but that just seems like not a good place, period.
And honestly, with the river there isn't a very good place to do it. We had to pick what we thought was the best location, and an engineering study hasn't been done to determine bridge length and what can be manipulated with the floodplain. That all have to be taken into consideration. And again, a lot of this roadway is tied to projected density. So if the board does not want the roadway in the future, we need to keep that density down on that development so that it doesn't suddenly justify a need to have that roadway.
And look at you've got the existing up there, look at the proposed, which still has, no, not that one. There you go. Mhm.
So yeah, the proposed.
See, it still has all of that.
And the reasoning for lining it up here is this would be a more optimal location for a traffic signal based on spacing, based on distance. And it would provide a signal to some of the Monticello residents that they may want it. Our intentions would never be for traffic to cut through on these local streets, and we would strongly discourage it, as much as possible.
And since you've got this up here, we still have the Fieldstone Parkway on the right going all the way up to, I've forgotten, was that
Yeah, so this
Bear
is,
Chapel or something like that?
this is existing right-of-way that was donated by Fieldstone Farms.
Yeah.
And this is the extension of that into the county that
Yeah.
is in our existing major thoroughfare plan, but was recently controversial.
Very controversial in that.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I think this would make it clear of what the issue was, because I talked to her today too. So let me just read you a couple sentences here, a paragraph. Therefore, let's see, a plan coming before BOMA tonight has roads bisecting our property, this is short property, from east to west and north to south in section 3, and I won't read all that. While these are conceptual and showing connectivity, we're concerned that we may be forced to divide the property in quarters at some point to pave the way for progress over keeping the pastoral feel. And this is important because they have an agri-hood kind of concept over there, and I think that's why they were concerned with that. So they proposed that, and that's what they were figuring that might disrupt that pastoral feel. Then the last thing is, what assurances would we have that we would be able to have flexibility in placing the road for connectivity on the property in a different location than they are showing? The current placement is in direct conflict with the conceptual plan that was unanimously accepted. You might want to speak to that. We respectively ask that the east-west connection from Matt Catcher to Highway 96 generally follow the existing roadway of the historic Old Charlotte Pike, and the north-south connection from West Haven to the northeastern corner of our property be allowed to show or to follow a development plan when drawn rather than a straight line through the property. And so that might clear
Yeah.
that up, but you want to
It's
speak to that?
not this one, it's the one before this? I mean, isn't it
Yeah.
on the,
I sent
Yeah.
that to you,
that
Paul.
Right.
one? Oh, nope, not that one.
Nope, up one,
That's
back-
what they
go
were
back one.
referring to,
down.
Go
for
back
that
one.
agri-hood
Oh, no, there,
development.
that one.
So to address this exhibit, this was exactly what was provided by Greg Gamble. Now, knowing that this could change, and Greg Gamble was representing the property owners, he provided us this information, and we put it in identical. Knowing that this may change over time, as it often does with development, we put language in there that these high-volume local streets could be modified by staff in conjunction with the developer as long as they generally met our requirements we're not creating traffic issues. And that language is included in the major thoroughfare plan, very specifically saying that staff has the ability to work with the developer of meeting the intent of this exhibit, which is simply providing connectivity and meeting traffic demands. So we have that flexibility.
that?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
it
That's
said,
also going to be in that particular page is, because I didn't look at 166 pages of the major thoroughfare plan. That is a page in
It
here?
is a page with a text that states that the city staff has the ability to work with the developer to finalize the location and layout of this. Because again, developments are changing. We couldn't possibly have a local street network plan that we expected developers to comply with, because they're always coming with new concepts, new designs.
True.
And they go through tons of iterations with their clients. And so we showed this because it was given to us, and we also gave us the flexibility to make those changes.
So he said, she said additionally, our concept plan developed with Greg Gamble for our property and presented to BOMA earlier this year including a policy amendment, was unanimously passed in June. So we're concerned then about the thoroughfare plan that was being presented, so that, she had
Yeah,
mentioned that.
we will
Okay.
absolutely work
Just
with her to
wanted-
make
I'll-
sure.
I'll make sure, she said she sent it to you, but I'll just make sure you
Okay.
get it in case it didn't come across.
Yes, ma'am.
And now, we also need to say that what we are looking at will be sent to the planning commission, because the major thoroughfare plan is a document of the planning commission, not a document of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
And that is correct. You all would make a recommendation to the planning commission, and we would then present it to them as well.
Alderman Blanton, did you have?
So my question was, and I figured it out, the legend was covering it, but based on the proposed road that you were thinking about removing but keeping, I was wondering where the Fieldstone ballpark fields were. And I couldn't see them, but it comes in right below it, so. Thank you.
So if there's no more questions on the West Harpeth area, I'd move to the Seward Hall area. And so in the Seward Hall area, again, based on feedback from property owners and developers, we basically took the Smith plan, we looked at that, we looked at Poplar Farms of where they're proposing to put Market Street, and we've reworked this area. And so the only roadways that are truly changing is going to be this east-west connection has been eliminated in Market Street versus coming down through Watkins Creek's common open space. We have straightened that out to go to Highway 96. Now, the reason why we moved it or was ever in the open space was because there's a large decentralized wastewater treatment drip field there that we could never put the roadway in. So working with the developer, we determined the best option was to make this straight. Again, the alignment and location of that roadway, we work with the developer on that in the final development plan stage, as long as it's on their property. And they're generally connecting from Taproot Farms, which is right here, to Highway 96. So if you go to the next exhibit, you can see where the change in the roadway has been straightened out somewhat to avoid the disruption to the neighborhood, but also to get us that important connection of north-south.
So may I ask, how much further west of Watkins Creek is this now than it was before?
So we generally showed it where the
Nine.
developer has it, but again, it's really up to the development as they come forward, and I believe it's going to planning commission of where they put it. I'm sure, I know for a fact topography has some to do with it. There's
Right.
two large hills out there that they're trying to
Yep.
split down the middle, and then from that point, it's really coming down to them trying to maximize their lot layout and trying to do it right. I know there's about a 75-foot buffer from Watkins Creek. The individual property lines, there's a 75-foot buffer to their common open space property line. And then I couldn't speak of the distance between there and Market Street, but that'll come forward on the PUD. And that would be the time to address it. And again, we would work with the developer to put that anywhere on their property as long as we had design speed and design standards and that north-south connection. That's what we're looking for.
And also that North Chapel Road connection from Wilson, is that correct? Or is that from,
Talk about,
what's that green line up there?
This is
Yeah.
existing North Chapel Road.
Yeah,
And so the plan would be, and this is on the existing plan as well, the plan would be to one day, as this develops, is to try to straighten this out and have a connection. And this is almost identical to what the Smiths brought forward, not exactly, but very close to what the Smiths. They had two access points on 96.
Yeah.
And we evaluated that and said, you know what, if, with the changes they're wanting to do and what they had proposed in the past, this makes sense just to update now. And again, we revisit this thing every time a developer comes in and work with them.
I think it's important to have connectivity over here, because we are getting a 4-lane highway here, and then the 4-lane will continue from there on out to Triune. So they're doing the design for that now. So I think we
They're
need to
building
really.
it.
They're building it.
They're building it.
No, they're building the first section of it. They're doing the design now, from the end of that, is it Wilson? It ends at Wilson?
Approximately, I think it's a little
Yeah,
east of that.
so, a little past Wilson. So it ends from Wilson to Triune, that's where they're doing the design work now. So they're building this, so once that other portion gets done, we'll have a completed 4-lane all the way to Triune. And so I think connectivity over here, I think we have to start looking at this whole area in a different way. We've sort of said, hey, sewer's gonna be too expensive, we just don't know what to do, but, you know, we need to take a look at this and say, what does this look like in 25 to 35 years? We really do need to look at that. And I know we're talking about UGB and what we're gonna do, if we're gonna keep everything or we're not gonna keep everything, but I think this has to have some serious discussion in this area. But I like the connectivity on those.
Thank you.
Well, let us say, you can't see it here, but if you look at the proposal that's coming up on Thursday, they've got Market Street really behind those houses in Watkins Glen.
Watson's Creek, yes, ma'am.
Watkins Creek.
Not Watson, but,
Watkins Creek.
Thank you. Watkins Creek.
Yeah.
thank you. I knew I wasn't saying exactly right. But, as I say,
Yeah.
that's where a big concern was whenever that first came up. And, you know, it may be kind of close to this that you've got right here, but it's still,
Yeah, we are not
it's going to be a
dictating.
real problem.
Well, we got more issues than that. Got
I
a big
agree.
development coming, but we have Clovercroft that's not even, could be our next McEwen, not saying now, but, you know, what happened to McEwen? Development all happened, and the road never got done. So we've got Clovercroft over there right now, not being addressed.
But
Alderman Blanton.
Okay, well, remember, I mean, this is in the, I guess this is all in the UGB, but now, to come into the city of Franklin, the property owners are going to have to make the request. You know, that's the way it has been for the last, 5+ years. And the thing is, with people that already have houses in subdivisions being a big part of the property owners, that would make things much more difficult to get annexed in to the city. So, you know, you're looking at a lot of area out here that you can tell from here it's nowhere close to the city limits right now, except coming from the north. See, except for right there, that's the only place that it's anywhere close to the city. And as I say, you can't really see there, but you can on the thing that's coming up on Thursday night. You can see the property lines of Watkins Creek.
Alderman Blanton.
I'm gonna ask a question that's gonna make me look ignorant. I'm good with ignorant, I'm not stupid. So, back, I had a situation early on where TDOT, if they have the road, that you almost have to ask them for permission to, like a driveway on, and I know this isn't a driveway. So, with us moving these proposed roads, because there's no development yet, how do we guarantee that it's gonna be blessed by TDOT, knowing that it's, do you understand my question? Because TDOT kind of decides, like, we can't make any more ingress, egress out of Mac Hatcher.
Yeah, but that's
I mean,
Yes.
I know this is different,
Yeah.
but which came first, the chicken or the egg?
So Mac
Well-
Hatcher's limited access facility, so we have zero say in that. We send them directly to TDOT if someone ever requests it.
Understood.
Chances are the answer is gonna be no on that road. On this roadway, we're generally looking, we're spacing these roadways adequate distance apart for signalization and to help TDOT limit access.
Okay.
And so, I will say this, TDOT has never said no to us before, could they? Yeah, they absolutely could. We need to check with them on that. But we generally understand what they're looking for, and we share the same common goal limiting access and having controlled access. And so by doing this planning, we feel that we're all on the same page. And in an ideal world, most of these large tracts around here will have connection to one of these side roads and come out at a signalized intersection. And that should be right up what TDOT's looking for.
So you
Right up
understand
there.
my question? It's like,
Yes.
are we planning something that will or will not be approved?
It'll happen, and TDOT has an access management document too that we refer to and
Okay.
look at in the guidance of how we do this.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor,
Go ahead, Alderman Barnhill.
so how many additional traffic signals are we looking at? Do you, I mean, we're looking, if this is the plan here.
So Market Street would for sure end up getting signalized. If this improvement happens, I'm sure it would get signalized too. It's really development driven. And instead of having 5 developments come in here and everyone requesting a signal, we're trying to limit it as much as possible. And that's where we've come up with this spacing. But a lot of that'll be driven by land use, development densities, et cetera. But we're really planning for them at the collector and arterial level.
And I might say that Clyde asking that question is a great question, because there's definitely going to be a signal probably
Yeah,
by the school.
yes,
That's where we're going to want it. That's that one right there.
yep.
Yeah. Trinity School's out there. And if we brought sewer down there eventually, Trinity could actually utilize their acreage. Now they can't build on, they've got all that acreage. They can't enlarge the school because they have no sewer. So that's another thing we have to look at in this area, for sewer, with connectivity, lights, everything.
So moving on, if there's no more questions on the Seward Hall area, some high-level summaries is we're implementing the improvements associated with typical sections in the Cool Springs area. Essentially, what we're looking at going from is more of a rural typical section to more of an urban. We get rid of some of the multi-use trails that were proposed in Cool Springs and just go to simply wide sidewalks everywhere on both sides of the street. As that development continues to happen, you're seeing buildings be pushed up to the right-of-way, and that just allows it to be more urbanized and pedestrian-oriented and pedestrian-friendly. And that's one of the things that came out of it. It also includes Highway 96 in that, and we would implement that mainly as development comes forward. The other changes we made was Liberty Pike was always a minor arterial. We know for a fact we will never widen that to a 5 or 6 lane roadway through McKay's Mill, so we changed the classification of that to a minor collector, which is pretty much what it is functioning as today, as a 2-lane roadway. Again, unlikely we would ever want to or propose to widen that as a 5-lane roadway through that existing development. We also changed Clovercroft from a minor collector to a major collector. Again, a lot of that will be decided based on development densities down the road, and we're not trying to overbuild the road. We're also not trying to underbuild it. We would make those decisions when a project comes forward and evaluate it closely, but changing the classification now allows us to reserve the necessary right-of-way that we may need out there. And if we don't need it for the roadway, I promise you, we will need it for the utilities. The other items that we did is we updated all of the project sheet cost estimates, just to help us long-term with our planning efforts. Happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
So back up, you said minor to major collector for Clovercroft, so that would need to be addressed if there's any development that comes in the future. We have a company right now wanting to put almost 600 homes in that area with a road that's going from a minor collector to a major collector. As I'm saying, we're looking at the next McEwen to say, wow, I don't want to be on the other end and say what we've all been saying. What happened? We allowed previous boards, previous people allowed development to happen on McEwen, all around McEwen. Avalon, McKay's Mill, Avalon, Mead of Avalon, Breezeway, all of that, Garden Club Estates, all of that to happen without addressing McEwen. So we have something coming before us with almost 600 homes, and yet Clovercroft is hanging in this balance of going now from a minor to a major. How do we classify? Is that only on our sections that we
I was
own?
going to say, only on our sections?
Because it can only
and
be.
the county's not?
How does it go if we say minor to major, and we own part and the county owns part?
So the county essentially refers a lot to our major thoroughfare plan and the urban growth boundary, if you
Yep.
look at it, and they update theirs based on ours at this point.
Okay,
But what this would allow us to do is simply, at least at a minimum, we got to reserve that right away.
Okay.
So that we can accommodate a
Got it.
future roadway project, and that's
Yeah.
what we're proposing to do
Well,
with Poplar Farms.
we're gonna have to do what we did for McEwen. We're gonna have to, but we're gonna have to have another partner. Eric, you and I have talked about this, and we're gonna have to pull the county in, and they say, you know, we have no money, we have no money, we know that, we've heard you. But we also were able to say, let's go look for grants. There are federal grants out there, and we still have economic development happening in that area. So I just want to address that, since we're talking about major thoroughfare plan, that maybe we ought to start looking at, we need some serious talks with the county, and when they tell us we have no money, well, we don't really want to throw money at Clovercroft either, but we're going to have to unless we want to be in the same position that we were in with McEwen, and then boards ahead of us go, oh, you people allowed all that development to happen and didn't address the road. I don't want to do that. So maybe we can find some grants too that can help us out on that road. Yeah. Thanks.
Paul, one more question. When you're talking about not widening Liberty Pike, from what junction to what junction, say?
So
Would you do it from Franklin Road? There's no widening of Liberty Pike from Franklin Road east?
what we're proposing with this one is it would remain in our minor arterial roadway to the residential node, the first traffic circle. And that includes, you know, like the Columbia State, the mixed-use commercial through there. We're actually working with one of the developers to widen that section based on projected traffic. However, Turning Wheel Lane, thank you, Jonathan. So from Turning Wheel Lane east, this is really just a residential area. You know, with
And then
McEwen
it
taking
stops.
the bulk traffic off of Clovercroft, long-term, we're thinking that this is adequate, and I don't think we could ever widen Liberty Pike wider than 2 lanes through McKay's Mill.
Well, you'd have to
But
buy
would you,
houses.
but would you ask for dedication, right-of-way dedication, if you knew that, say, from Franklin Road to Mac Hatcher, you were not
We-
going?
We would probably, there's not much undeveloped property there, but from Franklin Road to Mac Hatcher, we would probably look for some level of right-of-way dedication, but I don't think it would be a 5-6 lane roadway through there either.
Okay. But we're not, but you're saying we're not planning on widening. There's no plan, I understand government, and I understand that there's no plans to widen a lot of things, but you plan just in case it happens. But if you're going through there and you're taking somebody's property who's getting ready to develop a small piece of property, and you're taking 15, 18 feet off of his property, you're basically taking probably 3 or 4 units off of his, at least 2 off of his property, then off of his development. Then I'm just trying to ask and understand, if we know we're not gonna do it, why would we?
So we do analyze that on a case-by-case basis, because we are paying fee simple for that property, and we don't want to spend the city's money on property that we don't think is needed. So in those strange cases up in those areas, we take a hard look, a big group of us, look at that to see what is realistic to be able to take, what do we think we need, and we don't want to take too much, we don't want to take too little, we're trying to get it right. And then ultimately, that'll come back in the form of a road impact fee offset agreement to y'all, and we will get your approval to make that acquisition.
Okay.
But since we're spending city money and buying it fee simple, there's a group of us that are going to look at that very carefully to make sure it's the right decision for the city.
Well, and also the city and the board has made a pretty clear expectation of what the road profile looks like inside Mac Hatcher. So I think that would guide this as well.
Yeah.
And it does.
We're not putting 5 and 6 lane roads inside
Well, I'm
Mac
not
Hatcher.
asking to put 5 and 6
I know, I'm just
lanes.
telling you that guides what we put in here
Yeah.
We've got Alderman
and
Martin.
what we ask people to dedicate.
There are a lot of things I don't understand, but this is one that I have never understood. Why do we keep approving developments on Clovercroft? I don't care if we need the money or the county doesn't have the money, we don't have the money. The money's not there now. And why would we approve one more development on Clovercroft Road with the condition that it is in now? I mean, we say that, and every time it comes up, we say, yes, the road's not available for all this development, and there it goes. I mean, it's
So we
I
have
just don't understand
evaluated,
it.
we have evaluated safety issues on Clovercroft numerous times. The ones we've identified, looking at accident counts, et cetera, have always been in the county, and we've shared that with the county to get fixed. There are definitely a few spots in the city that we were watching and looking at, but there's no known major issue there today, safety-wise. We're really looking at the capacity of it. It is still more of a rural country roadway still versus an improved urban section. So it's something that I feel we need to just continue to watch, generate those collector funding, and then look to take on that project in the future. But as we bring forward developments, we are definitely evaluating it.
How much
And we would
more-
really want to start up closer to Highway 96 with those improvements.
How much more have you got, Mr. Holton?
I'm done, sir.
Oh, could we just have one quick
Because
comment?
it will come back to the work
Yeah,
session.
you're gonna see this again, work session in September, and vote then too.
And we've got a lot of other big things on the agenda.
I was just gonna say one quick thing. Liberty Pike at Carruthers, where Lifetime is, to the college, or actually to No Top Lane, South Star is gonna start widening that very soon to 4 lanes.
Yes, ma'am.
So that section where you have commercial, you have things going on there, that's appropriate, that's good.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
could I just ask one very small question? On the proposed bike and pedestrian, I don't think we mentioned that, but I wanted to ask a question on a piece of that where we're looking at going down Lewisburg. I take it that the sidewalk, multi-use path are on both sides of the road, not the river. You know, it doesn't show the river there.
So, yeah, it shows it on both sides of the road, which is what we typically do.
On the road, okay, I just want to make
However,
sure.
yeah, we show it on both sides, but the multi-use path that we show is the one the board had funded in the CIP, which is on the park side, on
Right,
Eastern Flame
right.
side.
But I'm just saying, that is still on both sides of the
Yes.
road.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll bring this
That's it.
back to the work session, the first work session in September. We're going to look at items 9 and 10 together, which are CDBG COVID funds for expenses incurred to prevent, prepare, and respond to the coronavirus. So that was for Columbia State and also for Mercy Community Healthcare. Any questions on those? Item 11 is the financing for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade and expansion project. Christine?
Good evening. We wanted to come back to the board and give you an update on the two financings that we are working on for the remainder of the wastewater treatment plant expansion project. We certainly, you have seen us talk about the project and the funding sources, and we most recently came to this board in July, on July 13th, and you approved by resolution the issuance of up to $22 million of water and sewer revenue bonds. The first update to report to the board is that the very 1st of August, we received word that SRF, State Revolving Loan Fund, had some additional dollars. And so we actually recalibrated the financings between the State Revolving Loan Fund amount and the water and sewer revenue bond amount. And we reduced what was a planned $22 million bond issue to a $13 million water and sewer revenue bond project amount. So the sources and uses table now reflects a $13 million water and sewer revenue bond and a $19.5 million state revolving loan fund. So we certainly appreciate, we're grateful for TDEC and State Revolving Loan Fund notifying us of additional dollars. We went ahead and moved forward with planning the bond issue. And if we could just go to the next slide.
Oh, okay.
We wanted to give you just a quick overview of what the different funding sources for the entire project. We borrowed $100 million back in 2017 from the State Revolving Loan Fund. The interest rate on those funds is a 1.55%. And by the end of this calendar year, we will be in repayment on all three of those loans from 2017. We do have a cash contribution from the utility for this project. Right now, we have that amount as $21.3 million. That may change slightly because we do have some contingency built in, and we'll be next summer assessing the exact amount of contingency that we need to use. For the 2021 State Revolving Loan Fund, State Revolving Fund loan, that's the $19.5 million, which we're in the process of securing. We estimate 1.85% for that interest rate. We don't know that for certain yet. That would be fixed by the state this fall as they get farther along in their approval process, but that will be a fixed rate. That's a 30-year loan, which will go into repayment probably this time next year or next fall, as those will be some of the last funds that will be used for the project. And then finally, the 2021 Water and Sewer Revenue Bond, which now is a project fund deposit of $13 million. We're estimating 2.3%, and we will actually know that official interest rate tomorrow. We are taking bids tomorrow morning to select the underwriter by competitive bid, and we will, by early tomorrow afternoon, have that debt service schedule finalized. And that's a 20-year final maturity on the Water and Sewer Revenue Bond. And then finally, we have a number of steps throughout the fall to secure both of these financings, of course, as well as finish the project this time next year. We certainly were excited. Early last week, we received word from Moody's Investor Service. They upgraded our bond rating on the Water and Sewer Revenue Credit from a AA3. We've been upgraded to a AA2. So the bonds that we will be selling tomorrow morning are at a higher credit, and we're excited for that. It also increased the credit rating on our 2017 Water and Sewer Revenue Bonds that were issued in the amount of $12 million to upgrade our water filtration plant. So those bonds that are outstanding now carry the higher credit rating. So we're very excited for that. We'll take bids tomorrow morning for our Water and Sewer Revenue Bond. We'll come back. The end of next week, we have a public hearing scheduled for the 2021 SRF loan application process. That will be on Thursday, September the 2nd at 6 p.m. in the City Hall training room. And that's a requirement of the State Revolving Loan Fund program to have a public hearing. We will, the next board meeting, you will see the loan resolution for the $19.5 million loan for consideration. We don't currently have that yet from TDEC, but they assured us as recently as I believe yesterday that they are working on that feverishly. And but many of the steps of that process have been completed, including the rate sufficiency, which is always something that we're excited to have that approved. So we do have that letter, but we'll be back in September 14th asking for consideration of the State Revolving Loan Fund, which will then get us closer to waiting a year from now, putting that plant into service. So we do appreciate all the support we've received. It's been a busy few months this summer getting ready to put this final financings into place, but we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Everybody good? Ready to go to the next one? Discussion regarding the 2021 Water and Sanitary Sewer Cost of Service Study and Rate Plan.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Chandler, and I've got Jim Marshall here with me. It's been a couple of years since we've been with y'all. Good to be back. I'm going to walk through. We've done a lot of work over a lot of months. We've boiled it down to 26 slides. I will try to do them as efficiently as possible, but it's important to provide y'all the information so that y'all can make the decisions that you need to make. We'll walk through water first and then sewer. We have recommendations for both for 2 years worth of rate action, which is what we've done really over the last decade, is develop a 5-year plan and then 2 years worth of rates so that we can reevaluate based on changes that are made. So 2 slides at the start are just to, we do this every day, but y'all don't. These are mostly for your reference. The typical objectives of a rate study are first and foremost to make sure that Each utility has enough money coming in. We're looking at things on a cash needs basis. So revenue stability and revenue sufficiency are the primary goals. Fairness and equity, this is not a for-profit business. It is a service for the community, but you want everybody to pay their fair share, nothing more, nothing less. And that goes right to number 3, which is ability to pay. That's a concern with every utility we walk into and try to help with their rates. Our job is to help utilities do as little to rates as possible and still fund everything you need to fund. So that's what we're trying to do tonight with our recommendations. Simplicity, you want your customers to be able to understand why they're being charged, what they're being charged, and how they're being charged. And finally, defensibility. Everything we do is based on industry standards. It makes sure rates defensible as to why you're charging your customers what you're charging them. Overview of the process, I touched on this, but if we develop a revenue requirement, we looked at FY20 as our base study, and then from there with working with Mark and Michelle and Christine and Eric, working with management to determine the best projections on a pro forma basis for years 22 through 26. How much cash do you need? That's O&M expenses, debt service, principal and interest, and rate-funded capital, how much money you need to spend through rates to do the projects that are outlined. And then finally, implement rate changes where necessary. So with that said, and I will say, jump in and ask any questions as we go along. Don't wait till the end. We're glad to answer them as they come to you. So with the water study, the first slide I'm showing is just the result of the water study, the base study for FY20. And what you'll see is on the far left column, the total recovery is at 90%. That means for every dollar that the water system needed to bring in, y'all brought in 90 cents. So that shortfall on a dollar basis is right at 1.4 million for the system. So then from there, you can go into the next slide, but from there, we take your FY20 and then based on the 5-year work plan and actual projected debt service and then projected O&M expenses, we developed the revenue requirement for the pro forma years 22 through 26. And we'll focus tonight for rate recommendations on recommendations for 22 and 23. So that's the revenue requirement as we look out into the future with the best estimates on cost. So yeah, you can go to the next one. Thank you. So then from there, how much, based on that $1.4 million shortfall, again, like I said a minute ago, we're trying to do as little as you have to do to rates in order to do everything you need to do to operate the way you need to operate. So what we have for the first 2 years, we've got a 4% in year 1 and a 3% in year 2 for the water system rates. So then if you look at the column that says additional revenue, that gives us our target on how much additional revenue we need to bring in to achieve that. So for the first year, we're going to target right at $480,000. For the second year, $374,000.
Can I ask a question? I may have
Sure.
to go back to the previous slide.
Okay.
Just real quick. It's just interesting that the O&M expenses would drop significantly from 2020 to 2022 and then continue. Is there some reason for that?
And part of it was in the 2020 study, we had, there was a large credit in the O&M expenses that we sort of normalized. And then from there, it's just based on what management has in the budget for those expenses for FY22 through 26. The rate funded capital stays steady, but the O&M, it drops. And that I looked back too, and actually in the the last iteration of this, when we were here in 17, it sort of did the same thing. On sewer, there's just a slight increase, as you'll see.
Are those just, I mean, you would think that there'd be more consistency in the maintenance along the line rather than and I don't understand how we'd get a credit, but,
It's almost a $400,000 difference.
yeah, and we don't even catch up again until 2025.
Right.
So I just, I mean, because that can put you in a pinch.
Yeah, we went through expenses pretty much at pretty detail and feel very comfortable with this. I can't speak to the specific anomaly that is driving those ups and downs, but this is the projected O&M expenses we feel confident in those numbers. And we make adjustments every year depending on what we're seeing. So, I think we stand by those numbers at this point.
And I will say that's part of why we do 2 years' worth of adjustments on the rates, because if that is a low estimate, or there's something, if something unforeseen comes up and those expenses end up going up a little more than anticipated at this point, then y'all are in a position to respond to that.
And to better answer your question, we'll dig into the detail a little bit, and when we come back, we'll speak to that a little bit.
That always makes me a little nervous, because then if it goes back up to 10.9, then we'll have a bigger shortfall than we expect, and that continues for
Understood.
2 years, and then you've got $1 million shortfall that you weren't planning for when we did this rate adjustment
Yes, sir.
this time, so.
If I could ask just a small question, just on the next to the last line, it says less other revenue, and it's exactly the same amount every year. What is that?
Well, what we did there is to be conservative. We took what the FY20 study, what we were showing in it, and just kept it. I mean, it could go up. You don't really want to, we're not counting on it to go up, because what that other revenue is interest income and late payments, penalties, those sorts of
Okay.
things. And it's just a conservative approach. If that goes up, then your rates have to bring in fewer dollars. But we felt like that was an appropriate way to not count on additional revenue coming in from those sources, particularly on the water side, because there's not as much growth. But we kept it consistent in both studies. So, as I said, the revenue target for the 2 years that we're focusing in on is 4% and then 3%, and then from there we have plugged in 3%. Hopefully when we come back in 2 years, hopefully that will not go up based on projections. Could potentially even go down. So you can go to the next one. Thank you. All right, so we are presenting 2 different options. They both generate the same amount of money over the 2-year period. The first option is going to be getting all of the additional revenue in the customer charge, and then the second option is going to be half in the customer charge and half in the volumetric charge. So option A, or the first option, would be to go up on the customer charge for each rate class in year 1 of $2.21 and year 2 of $1.72. Again, that gets you to your total target of $853 of additional revenue.
Is that per 1,000 gallons?
That is the customer, that's not the volumetric charge, it's the
Okay.
customer charge. The way y'all are set up, you have a customer charge and then a per 1,000 gallons charge.
Thank you.
This is all in the customer charge.
This does include the first 1,000 gallons of
Oh,
Correct.
Absolutely.
use
Yeah.
as well, but this is kind of your fixed cost, and then everything above 1,000 is a volumetric charge.
Right,
And
because y'all
the-
still have that.
And the
in-
thing is, though, it's amazing that, it has the first set goes up to 9,000 gallons or something like that. And then, but the average use is like 5,000.
It's like right at 5,600,
I
I
know.
think.
just under
So we
6,000.
had talked, whenever we talked about this earlier, in earlier years, we talked about that means that the people that, like live alone, don't have any money to spend, they are still paying the same flat rate as those of us who use a lot more water and don't have the problem. I mean, you may not think that the monthly rate of $2.21 is very much different, but for some people that is. And we had always kind of tried to keep that minimum rate down low, and so I'd like for us to, not necessarily right here, but talk about that, because I think that is really important for some of the water customers here in the city of Franklin. I mean, not everybody is making the whatever they're saying, the average $100,000 per whatever.
Those 8-bedroom houses.
Yeah.
Well, and to speak to that, just a little bit on the other side of what we see as we work with utilities across the southeast, is that low usage is not necessarily congruent with low income. So in other words, the people on fixed income or low income don't have the money to buy the newer, more efficient appliances. They will be less likely to fix a leak or a running toilet or something like that because they don't have the extra funds. So there's not necessarily that direct correlation on that, but we don't there's not a utility that we walk into where affordability is not a concern. And that's part of why, we do as little as we have to in order for y'all to do everything. And then, when we get to the sewer side, the debt service is what's driving that, and that is a fixed cost. So that's a definition of the fixed cost. But anyway, so that'd be that. You can go on to the next slide, and this might speak to a little bit of what we were talking about. So the result of the study is that, so that's where the cost of service column is that it costs y'all $19.51 to have a residential customer on your system before you sell them the first drop of water. And then it's $5.76 per 1,000 gallons if you were to get that $19.51. Over the 2-year period, your current rate is $14.11, including that 1,000. And then the proposed rate, that's 2 years worth of rate changes, the 2 years of customer charge increase would go up to $18.04, including that 1,000 gallons. And just to refresh your memory, the blue line is your cost to serve. That's that result of the study. The red line is your current rate on a per 1,000 gallons basis. And then the green line is where you would be at the end of these rate adjustments on the customer charge portion. And just bottom line, if you're below the blue line, you're losing money. If you're above the blue line, you're making money. Is sort of the way to look at that. And then these are just the numbers that are driving the picture above. But what it shows is at the end of the 2 years, the increase would be $3.93 per month for a residential water customer. And then option B, again, designed to bring in the same amount of revenue, just splitting it between the customer charge and the volumetric charge. And I've got the amounts laid out for each of the 2 years for customer and volume. Again, it'll bring in the $853,000 of additional revenue based on FY20 billing statistics. You can go to the next. Thank you. Again, just showing the rate changes. The first 2 columns are the same because that's the result of the study and the current rate. Proposed rate, the customer charge at the end of 2 years would go up to $16.07, and the volumetric charge would go up 32 cents over the 2-year period. Again, and then because it's split between volume and customer charge, for your residential and inside customer, the average usage is right at 5,600, and it would go up between $325 and $350 per month. And this is just a summary of everything I just said, so I will not recap it for you unless there are any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you've been doing this for a long time with Franklin, and it's the same process year by year. So why were we, what's the explanation of being $1.4 million short in revenue if we did this 2 years ago? I mean, how do we know we're not going to be another $1.4 million short in 2 years from now? If you've gone through the same process, you've done the same projections, we've done everything, have we been working to get it closer and closer, or?
Yes.
Okay, so at one point in time, we were a long way apart, obviously, and then you're trying to work us back in. So the last proposal, you didn't have us breaking even, is that correct? The one before, the last rate change?
Yes, in the last iteration of this, so the last 5-year plan, we had water right at 2.9% over the 5-year period. So now we're in years actually 4 and 5 because of everything. There was a year that was skipped. So, because the last time we looked at this was 2007, off of 2017 data. So going from recommending, so what we were saying at that point was 2.9 each of the next 5 years, right? So y'all did 2.9 for year 1, 2, and 3, and now those expenses have gone up a little more. The revenue requirement's gone up a little bit more than we anticipated, and so now those project the rate recommendation for this first 2 years of rate changes is 4% and 3% as opposed to a 2.9 over those two. So it's very nominal because of the way that y'all have taken rate action over the last decade plus, and the fact that y'all are managing expenses very well. These are very nominal rate increases.
I'm just questioning the projection is all I'm questioning. So, and yeah, I don't think you.
Yeah, jump in.
I'm not sure you answered
Okay, I'm sorry.
my original question.
Right,
So,
and being in the peanut gallery, I can listen. The target from the previous study when we were here, the target for 2022, I just had it, bear with me. 22 projection was to be at 12.6 million. The 2020 projection was to be at 11.9, or really right at $12 million budgeted need for 20.
so we were 13 million. So we were well over the projection.
Correct.
So, which goes back to my previous question
Right.
about a reduction in O&M expenses. And so, I'm not being critical, we missed our projection in the last run, and now we have a larger shortfall than we expected. And, so I'm just throwing that out, just, not that, everybody misses projections, I mean, I'm not trying to put blame anywhere, but
Right.
it's just one of the things that so we're actually, the 1.4 million, we're actually catching up from what we did last time because we didn't project enough costs to cover where we were. So the 2.9% just wasn't enough, though it was during your original projection, it would have been enough, right?
Right.
Correct? Right. So,
Right.
All right, so I'm just make sure I understand
Yes.
what we're doing.
You do. Thank you. Any other questions on water? All right, so on the sewer, cost of service.
Oh, I got one more question.
Sure.
Do you put a contingency in this? A contingency?
You've got a fund balance that helps you with this fund, and you actually run a combined utility. Water and sewer is one collective utility fund. So
Right.
you've got that capability that helps you absorb something like a shortfall that we've seen in terms of what we projected, in terms of revenue, rates and revenue meeting
Did we pull funds
expense
from
requests.
that to balance it out? We didn't. Well, I mean, it doesn't look like we did. Or did we pull more funds out and we still had a $1.4 million shortfall?
You're still balancing every year. Right. You use your fund balance or your reserves to help you offset anything that doesn't come through rates. But it's a completely independent business unit. It's not taxes, it's the funds we carry in that help us absorb anything that doesn't meet the target.
Okay.
So what's our fund balance now in water?
Do you have that number, Christine? You know that? It's significant. It's in the 30+ million range. I think it's in, yeah, collectively.
What did you
it's
say?
30.
Like 35 million.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, and I will point out that, as Christine said, y'all obviously are, when the bond people look at it and things like that, they're gonna, as Eric was saying, and for an income statement and balance sheet purposes, they're gonna combine that, the water and sewer together. And if they didn't feel like you had rate sufficiency between the two systems, you wouldn't have ever gotten an upgrade as far as that goes. And as we look at sewer as well, because y'all have made the plans that you've made and adopted the rates that you've adopted, planning for this debt service that is massive, y'all are able to take on this debt without huge rate increases, because you've been taking a bite of the apple each time and slowly but surely getting where you need to go. But what that's done is if you'll go to the next slide, the water system, the sewer system result of the FY20 study is you're over collected or over recovered by 5.3 million. So, if you combine the two systems, you're obviously over where you need to be for the mark. But from a cost of service standpoint, you want to look at each system in a silo, because, if I'm a water customer that doesn't have sewer service, then I don't want to be
And
paying
vice
for
versa.
a service I don't receive. So from a rate philosophy, you want to separate them out, and that's why we do it the way that we do it, which is not income statement or audit. It's a different concept. So then of the study, the sewer study, again, you're over recovered by 33 cents on the dollar. And then we look at the pro forma projections, and again, the format's going to look the same as we just walked through. But what I do want to point out, and I alluded to it a few minutes ago, in the FY20 study, debt service, principal, and interest was 1.6 million. In 2023, it's 6.6. So you've been building up to needing to take on this debt service. Very large increase in your revenue requirement, and y'all are well positioned to do that without huge rate increases. We can go to the next one. And so what we're showing on the water side, on the sewer side, is in year one a 3% need, and in year two a 2.5%. And you'll see in year 3, 4, and 5 we're saying 2%. It's going to still be an over recovery at that point. So hopefully after you get through the biggest couple of years of debt service and the debt service starts to drop back down, then you may not have to do as much. But again, we don't have a crystal ball for the next 5 years, and hopefully expenses will remain where they've been projected, but it's hard to know. The rate funded capital is just based on the 5-year plan. So anything unforeseen, but we feel good about that. We know what debt service is based on the information that you have currently that Christine just walked through a little while ago. So at this point, The target would be 622,000 in year one and 534 in year two. And again, we're recommending two different options, same concept. Option one would be all in the customer charge, and just from a rate nerd standpoint, debt service is driving it, and that's a fixed cost, so ideally, you would want to line up your fixed cost with your fixed revenue, which would be in the customer charge. But that would be an increase in year one of 205 and an increase in year two of 176. Again, bringing that total target of 1.1 million in additional revenue over the 2-year period. What that looks like on your rate curve is the result of the study was $19.18 and then $3.66 per 1,000 gallons. You're currently at 2003. And this, at the end of the 2 years, would have you at a customer charge, including the first 1,000 gallons, of $23.84, and that's represented by that the green line on top. And then, so a total over the, your average user is right at 6,000, and that would be a $3.81 per month increase over the next 2 years, or at the end of the next 2 years. Option B would be splitting it between the customer charge and the volume charge. Say that in year one, you're going up on the customer charge $1.02 and up on the per 1,000 gallon charge of 14 cents. In year two, it drops down to 88 cents on the customer charge and 12 cents on the volumetric charge. And then this is just the graphic representation of that. The increase in the customer charge would be $1.90 over the 2-year period, and the volumetric charge would go up 26 cents, which is a $3.22 increase to your average residential inside customer. Questions?
So if the red line and the green line are above the blue line, we're collecting enough money.
That's correct.
I like that.
You like that, I know, yes, that is absolutely correct. But you don't want to get too far above it. We're trying, it's trying to be a balance between, where you need to be. And, when we first started looking at this, y'all weren't talking about borrowing near the amount of money that you ended up having to borrow for the treatment plant and all the other projects y'all have had to do. So, it's a balance to try to figure out the best projections without over collecting and make sure we help y'all get where you need to
So
go.
one statement, a friend of mine used to say, Mark, you'll love it, there's nothing too good for the fully leveraged. So we're absolutely there. So we have the best of everything. It makes sense to me, I just thought, not my opinion, that the volumetric side is good for water, but not necessarily good for sewer, because we have such a huge fixed cost in the sewer side, correct? Isn't that what you're saying? So,
Yes.
if I explain myself correctly.
I would rather see y'all, first and foremost, getting the money is the most important, but secondly, because debt service is driving the need,
Correct.
then I would love to see it be in the fixed charge.
In the fixed charge.
When
But
really,
water-
in both water and
And
sewer,
but-
in both water and sewer, you're under recovering that fixed cost.
Right.
In particular. And it has been a policy discussion with the board about how to allocate that, whether you put it all on the fixed cost or you split it. The direction the last couple times we've done this, several times we've done this, has been that 50-50 and option B. But we continue to kind of lose a little bit of ground on that fixed cost. That's just the way the numbers come out in
Yeah.
both utility components.
But I could
So-
see doing option A, I think I'm going the right direction. In the sewer, the first option would cover more of the fixed costs, correct? Okay, but and that's where most of our costs are.
Correct.
In water, it's not necessarily that way.
Correct.
And
Well, actually, it is that way in water.
Let
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
it is?
if
Okay.
you'll,
Yeah.
we're going back to slide, I'll speak
Okay.
directly into the
And then
microphone, is
I'm-
what was asked. I
looked
guess.
at it wrong.
Sorry.
Slide 12, your current residential customer charge on water is $14.11, and you're giving away $5 worth of water in that. You're giving away 1,000 gallons of water, right? With your rate, that's $5.29. Attempting to do math, that's somewhere just south of $9 effective customer charge.
Okay.
Based off the results of the study, you can charge $19.51 without including any water. Now, we're not recommending a $10 increase to the customer charge. I'm just pointing out math. There's, a 1,000 gallon customer cost y'all on water, residential inside, cost you, what, $26 and change. That, based off the results of the study, the $19.51 plus the $5.76, so just north of $26, you're collecting $14 from that customer. So you're intentionally under-recovering on the low-end users. Well, if you're under-recovering on someone, you need to over-recover on someone else to become whole, right?
Okay.
So while the need on the sewer side is driven by debt, your current customer charge on sewer is much closer in line with where it needs to be compared to the gap on the water side.
So, and the reason being is we're just not charging, the lower user is getting a better rate, and rightfully so, I agree, than the larger user, so I get that, so, all right.
Yeah, that's kind of your policy
That has been a
question.
policy long, I just wanted to make
The
sure.
math of it shows that you're a little more out of balance on the fixed cost
Right.
component compared to the fixed costs we identify here.
Okay.
And that's
I'm
what
good.
you all need to give us
Yeah.
some direction on.
I'm good.
Now, if we can go to 26, slide 26. And I'll just touch on this very quickly. We do look at the reclaim system as well. For the FY '20 period, the under-recovery on the reclaim system was right at $99,000 on a $207,000 need. We're recommending that y'all go up 10 cents a year on that rate over the next 2 years, with the thought that it will probably go to the next 5 years, but at this point, just the 2 years' worth of recommendations. The system is so much smaller than the other two. It brings in a whopping $16,000, but there is a shortfall, and after discussions with management, and it was decided that we should make a recommendation that y'all start inching up on that.
If I may, so reclaimed water is an alternative disposal method for sanitary sewer. So the shortfall that we have in the reclaimed water department is accounted for as an expense in the wastewater utility in this study. So we view it as the ability to get rid of water as irrigation water versus discharging to the Harpeth. So that's how we view it. So just wanted to make a clarification on that.
And it's been many years since
Yes.
several years since this has been addressed, so it would make sense to put a little more of that onto the reclaimed customer.
Well,
as
it's
part of this.
it's a win-win for everybody, with no doubt about it, so that people that use a lot of water, but there's also, they're gaining a lot too. So, I mean, I do think raising that rate, every so often, or even annually, or once every 2 years, makes perfectly good sense. And while that user probably doesn't like it, but that user has no option to that. I mean, they have to use that water to keep their golf courses green and their irrigation system, the bigger users do. They have to have that. So there has to be, but they do need to pay their fair share on that. But it is also, on the other hand, as you said, providing a service that we need as well. So it's not as clear, as it might be.
Any other questions for us?
You did well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark.
Okay, good job.
So can you hear me, Alderman Martin? I'll speak loudly. So as a companion to the cost of service study, we took another look at irrigation water. Last time we spoke with y'all, we were asked to take a look at a winter pricing model for, excuse me, for irrigation water. We go to the next slide, please. So we're going to touch on our existing rate structure as we have it for potable irrigation water. Talk about our evaluation methodology for the winter pricing model, look at the results, and then open it up for some discussion. So next slide. So we've talked about this before. I'm going to keep this fairly brief, but irrigation through a potable water meter, we have an inclining rate structure for the water piece. On the sanitary sewer piece, as you know, as you charge through a potable drinking water meter, we charge sanitary sewer associated with it as well. So those sanitary sewer rates decline as the volume goes up. And that's really to acknowledge that in the summertime when you use more water, a portion of it is potentially outdoor water usage. So the irrigation meter fee, which would be a separate irrigation line, which you would not charge sanitary sewer on, we currently have an impact fee of $3,150. The complete installation for that fee is a little under $800 for a total irrigation fee of just under $4,000 for a 3/4 inch residential irrigation meter. We recently did some calculations on what it actually costs to install a 3/4 inch meter, and that involves digging down onto the water main, tapping the water main, running a copper line to the property, setting a box, setting the riser, installing the meter. That cost to us is about $3,350. So just wanted to set that kind of base information as we get into this. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we looked at several options, one of which was to continue our existing practices. Another option was to modify the irrigation meter impact fee and installation fee. And then lastly, to look at the implementation of a winter pricing model. So that's what we did an evaluation on, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Next slide, Michael. So we used actual water usage data between 2018 and 2020. The 2018 to 19 data, we had a sample size of about 13,500 accounts. And then the 2019 to 2020 data, it was just over 14,000 customers. The reason why we didn't have the entire set was we had to look at inactive meters, we had rereads and misreads, all these other things that we pulled out so we can have a clean data set to do the evaluation. So for the winter pricing model, if you remember, is that you apply a winter average to summer consumption, and then you eliminate that excess on the sewer bill. So they're essentially not paying the corresponding water consumption charge on the sewer. They're paying that winter average on the sewer. So just wanted to remind everyone of that piece. The winter months we looked at were the months from November through February, and the summer months for the evaluation for the winter pricing average was June through August. One thing we did do was look at, we would bill the minimum of either the actual usage or the winter average. We did add a 30% variability charge onto the winter average. As you know, in the summertime, you have people home from school, you have additional showering, so we did add a 30% for variability. We also eliminated the declining rate structure on the sanitary sewer side because this winter averaging would account for the outdoor water usage. The rates we used were also the January 1st, 2021 rates. So that's just kind of the baseline and the conditions of the evaluation. So we'll talk about the results on the next slide, please. So the 2018 and 2019 data, we looked at about a $600,000 reduction in revenue by applying the winter average. And that averages out across that 13,500 customers at about $45 per month per customer. $45 per year per customer, so $375 per month. the 2019 to 2020 data. We also looked at about a 600,000 reduction in revenue, but the cost difference was 42, or the revenue reduction was about 4260 per year. So next slide, Michael. So we looked at kind of dug a little deeper into the results for the 2018, 2019 data. It was a higher number. Just wanted to kind of present the results here. So if you look at the 50% of that $600,000 revenue loss, about $300,000, is associated with about 1,000 customers. So about 1,000 customers, if you apply that winter average, drove 50% of that revenue reduction. 90% of the revenue reduction was associated with a little over 4,000 customers. So when you look at it on the number of customers who actually saw an increase in their combined water and sewer bill versus a decrease in their combined water and sewer bill, there was about 3,300 customers that had a decrease and a little over 10,000 customers who had an increase. And that's if you recover that $3.75 of lost revenue per customer. So we kind of broke it down a little bit further and looked at individual customers on the system. If you do recover that $3.75 of lost revenue per customer, the 1,000-gallon customer would see an effective rate increase of just under 19%. The 6,000-gallon customer, which our average is about 5,600 gallons a month, they would see an effective rate increase of 7.2%. And then a 10,000-gallon customer would be just shy of 5%. So that's, just wanted to kind of present that and see where the analysis went. So if we can go to the next slide, Michael. So again, these were the potential options we looked at. There's a lot of ways to dig into this concept and different options we can look at. But these being the broad concepts, I wanted to kind of go back to these three sort of options we were looking at, whether we continue going on with the way we are. Do we want to consider moving forward with the winter pricing type model? Or do we want to consider modifying the way we look at impact fees and installation fees on water irrigation meters? So that's my quick summary. I've got another slide that we can talk to a little bit, but I'd like to hear some feedback from you all and kind of go from there.
Let me chime in though first.
Yeah.
I want to be clear in terms of a recommendation from the staff perspective. Given what Mark just shared with you, I would not recommend making a change to the winter model. That original discussion was around fairness and equity. I think a setup that basically causes 3/4 of your customers to pay more and 1/4 to get a benefit, to me, doesn't make any sense. I think you've got the system you have now. It may not be perfect, but it does provide sort of a premium for folks who choose to water more extensively. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that encourages conservation. I think it's okay to put a larger cost burden on folks that use water in that way, which I would consider to be nothing wrong with it, but it's a little more of a luxury than base water needs. So I think when we look at it from a broader kind of policy perspective, I think the recommendation of staying where you're at really does provide that. The declining or the declining rate that is already in place with sewer does give a little bit of benefit to higher volume users as well. So when you look at it as a whole, and then the fact that the actual cost to install the meter is pretty close to the number that people are paying now, I really don't think you have a system in a structure that is out of whack. I actually think it lines up pretty well with both a fair allocation of cost and not putting the burden on other customers for those who choose to water heavily. I know that other part of that argument is a fairness about paying for sewer or not paying for sewer. But I think when you look at it as a whole, I think that the burden shifting across all of your utility customers just doesn't make sense to me. I think you have more of a downside there than this other argument. But that, just to put a point on it in terms of a staff recommendation, that's what I would suggest to you, that I think you're at a pretty good place already when you balance the whole.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. One more, please. So we did take a look at kind of the return on investment. So we did some bracketing on kind of the impact fee on an irrigation meter. We'll look at $4,000 since that's the highest number on here. But if you look at a $4,000 charge on an irrigation meter, your return on investment, if you're a 15,000 gallon customer, which is not uncommon for those who choose to irrigate, is 7.3 years. At 20,000 gallons a month of irrigation water, you're looking at a return on investment of under 6. So again, obviously, the more you irrigate, the more quickly you get your money back, so to speak. So right now, our total fee, Eric had mentioned, is pretty close to what our installation fee is, which is about $3,350. So you would expect, if somewhere between the $3,000 irrigation fee and the $4,000 irrigation fee, your return on investment is 5-6 years, depending on the volume of water you use, unless you're on the lower scale of irrigation. So I just wanted to share this with you, since we did go through the exercise of looking at how many years it takes to kind of pay it back. So
I've got Alderman Peterson has a question.
I have a question. I realize I don't really know, how does the irrigation meter work? I mean, is it in addition to your regular water meter?
Yes, ma'am. So if you have a typical 3/4 inch domestic water meter installed, what we would do is tap the main water line near that tap, run a new service line, install another box and another meter. And at that point, a private plumber would have to take off from there to run irrigation system. So yes, it's a whole new installation.
The reason that I'm asking that is that I've had somebody tell me that they haven't irrigated any, and they still have to pay a certain fee every month, whether they have irrigated or not. And so I don't know exactly what that means.
I don't know. I'd have to dig specifically into that.
There's a minimum fee.
Yeah, I think with any water fee, that it's going to be based on that fee structure of customer charge, cost per 1,000 gallons. So that's what.
What was the question?
Now, the question is, if I had somebody say to me that they had not irrigated anything, and they still had to pay a substantial monthly fee just to have the irrigation meter.
I'd have to look, I'm sorry, Alderman Peterson, I'd have to look at the specific account.
That's the reason I don't know
but
anything
yeah.
about it, and I just
It may
wanted to
be if
ask.
they've not charged if they have a separate irrigation meter and they've not charged their irrigation system, they may be paying that monthly customer charge that we charge to all accounts. So if they have an irrigation account, I think Ms. Chandler spoke to us earlier that it costs about $19 to get a line to your house and maintain that line. So
Oh, okay, so in other words, they would be having to pay the $19 a month,
yeah,
even
as
if they never
that
used
base
it.
customer charge. So
Okay.
yeah, just prior
I
to.
never heard any number, but that's the reason I was
Yeah,
trying to find out a little bit more about it.
I'd be happy to dig into the specific
Thank you.
account if you'd like. So.
I'd be interested in knowing, because I don't need names,
Mm-hmm.
but just to understand, because that doesn't make, it doesn't add up. So basically, I guess is the best way to put that. Several years ago, we had a gentleman in here who was trying to present the logic and illogical portions of whatever he was doing. And I thought this had sort of gone away. So we've been looking at this for the last 2 or 3 years to do this. I totally agree with Eric. I don't see any reason to make any changes whatsoever. to accommodate a third, because I doubt if it's to accommodate 25% to lower, to increase 75% of the water customers in order to allow 25% to have a lower rate. If they want a lower rate, put a tap in. Will that not do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's,
What, does this, when you install a meter, you have to have a backflow preventer.
Correct.
Does this include the backflow preventer?
That does not include the backflow preventer or any of the other irrigation plumbing.
Okay, so that, okay.
So they would have to take off from the
Your
meter.
plumber, you don't put the backflow preventer in.
No,
the-
sir.
Their plumber would have.
We
or
do
their
inspect
irrigation.
them annually,
Okay.
but that's the
Okay.
private, yep. Yes, sir.
If everybody's all watered out, I'd like to move on and discuss.
Kind of made me have to go to the bathroom, I don't know, but.
Yeah, that's an issue maybe, but item 13, we're going to talk about it for city employees, one-time option to sell back vacation time. We're going to put item 14 on the next meeting's work session, and then we'll do item 15 and 16 also, so. Eric,
Mr.
you
Mayor,
wanna
I'll go ahead
talk
and
about
start it
item
off.
13?
Kevin Townsell's here as well, our HR director. But this is a proposal that we would like to do as a one-time benefit to some of our city team members. One of the struggles over the last year and a half or so with the impact of COVID has been the ability for some of our team members to use their vacation time. We have done a couple things to help with that. There is already an existing policy that allows them to convert amount over what they can carry over, and your amount that you're allowed to carry over is the amount you can earn in a given year. So you're allowed to carry over that amount and then build that on that in the next year. But we allow folks also, if you're over that amount, to convert up to 5 of those days into additional sick time. That's been a policy for many years. And then during COVID, we have provided the ability this last year into 20 into 21, calendar year 20 into 21, for folks to carry over an additional 40% of that total. So really 140% of what you can earn in a year you could carry over into this current calendar year. And then this special policy into next year allows a 20% carryover. So we're kind of stepping it down over 2 years to help folks carry over more of that time and hopefully be able to use it as there's more opportunity to do so. So that's already in place. But what this is an additional ability for folks to sell back to the city or have the city buy back from them a week of vacation. Now, to be eligible, you have to have in your vacation balance by November 1 the equivalent of 2 weeks vacation. So for a standard employee, 40-hour a week employee, that's 80 hours that you'd need to have in place in your vacation balance by November 1. For an on-shift firefighter, that's 108 hours because they have a 54-hour week when you take the total hours worked in a year divided by 52. So that would be the threshold for it. They need to tell us by November 1 that they want to do it and elect to do it. It's an all or nothing. You get the week bought back or you don't. We're not going to do partial weeks. It's just the whole thing. And then one of the December paychecks, there's actually 3 paychecks in December, probably be the middle one, I'm told by our payroll folks, would include that with the paycheck. So it'd be the equivalent of a cash payout of 1 week of vacation. It would be subject to all the normal taxes, et cetera, that happen there. And it would be that additional piece that one time. Going forward, we want to make sure our people use their vacation, get that chance to recharge and spend it with their family, but we know it's been hard to use it over the last couple years, and this gives a chance to manage those balances with folks and not have that be a stressor, help us with staffing at the end of the year, and we think do a nice thing for folks that tend to have those higher balances. So that's what we'd propose. If you're comfortable with that, we would bring a resolution forward for you to approve that at the September meeting. And we'd actually probably, if you're comfortable with it, start getting the word out so people can start thinking about it and it may affect some of their planning for the rest of the year and some of our scheduling for the rest of the year in certain operations. So this is, you may remember many years ago, before my time here, this had been a part of what the city had done under a little different structure. We opted to discontinue it. We want to bring it back just this one time to help with this unique situation, and then return to where we make sure we encourage people to take that time because it's important as a general principle. So, Kevin, anything you want to add?
I think you covered it totally.
Well, Kevin's here to answer any questions.
That's right, that's right.
I think that's amen. Go ahead.
Social Security and income tax you would take out.
All that comes out, yeah.
Insurance you probably would not, right?
Well, the insurance is a set cost, so that would just be absorbed in the normal
Right.
paychecks
In
in
the
that
other-
month.
in the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's move to item 15, which is the Main Street Sidewalk Repair Project.
So let me just say a quick word of introduction on this. We're bringing this back to you because we talked about it and we want to bring back that discussion. But we also want to step back with you because when we originally put this in the budget, it was a simpler program. It was really looking at the pavers and replacing them, refreshing them because they were worn, looking at some really basic elements and just restoring them. Some curbs, some other areas, and just restoring them. From there, it has kind of turned into a potential to do more, looking at the tree wells and some other more broad-based design elements that make this project a much more expensive and extensive project. So we didn't want to automatically slip into project creep without asking you that directly and talking through what that means. There's merit to all the options. But before we go further and spend more time looking at design, et cetera, let's make sure you're comfortable with that. I will also say, in the interest of rumor control, we've gotten a number of calls over the last couple weeks with people saying that we have decided to remove engraved pavers. That has not been the direction. In fact, the general direction from this board has been the opposite of that, at least in terms of what I think I heard a month or so ago. But we do want to walk through that. But that is not something that has been decided or is something that we're even pursuing at this point. It was something we brought up that might make the long-term maintenance a little easier. This is a program that had previously been run by the Heritage Foundation and now is in sort of a maintenance phase. So I'll hand it off to Paul to go through the specifics. But the reason this is here is to make sure we get kind of a clear idea of how you want this to proceed, and we'll walk through what that looks like.
Okay, so just as Eric stated, we just wanted to take a step back and remind the board why we even brought this project forward, and ultimately, whatever decision you give us is what we're going to implement. So this project was funded through the CIP process when the board did the prioritization process at an estimated cost of around $2.2 million. And this project came about because during those discussions of projects, the street department said, we're spending a substantial amount of money removing pavers and having to set them back because the pavers today are on a sand base. The way we're doing a lot of our streetscape projects now with these brick pavers is we're actually pouring a concrete base, some type of asphalt adhesion material, and then we're setting the pavers on there. And we're experiencing little to no problems on those sidewalks. They said, hey, it would be great if instead of spending this money annually trying to remove these trip hazards, if we could come back, pour the concrete base, and put the pavers back. And we, talking internally, we said, well, that would give us a chance to maybe upgrade or enhance the streetscape by replacing the pavers, because the pavers there are really, they're old, they're worn. It would be a nice way to just simply refresh streetscape without doing a complete redesign of Main Street or an entire revision of Main Street. So that's how the project really came about. And after talking internally after the last discussion, we wanted to make sure the board understood that's where the original budget was. We can take it wherever you want, though. So the first discussion, which I think we got very, very clear directions, Eric said, was what should be done with the engraved pavers. And we heard it very clear that the board wanted to try to replace the existing engraved pavers in kind and generally try to keep them in the same location. So that was a very important decision that we needed to make sure we understand where you all stood on that issue. The options that William presented, and he's helped outline this back in the day, was three different concepts, concept A, B, and C. And these three concepts were a result of multiple departments getting together and giving input. And anytime you give input, scope starts to creep, and I always say one of my jobs, or our project manager's job, is to bring that scope back down. If we have to creep in scope, we just want to make sure that that's truly what the board wants to do. We presented three options. Option A was essentially removing the pavers in their existing locations, pouring a concrete base, and replacing those pavers. Again, if there's engravings out there and they are legible and we can replace that, we would re-engrave those pavers and put them back generally in the same location the best we can. Then they came up, you start involving all the landscape architects and parks department and street department that maintains the trees. They came up with the idea of saying, it would be great if we could move some of these trees into the roadway, which is a really great idea to try to make wider sidewalks and allow for more room for these trees to grow. But it was definitely outside of the scope that we had originally intended to do. And option B was simply moving all the trees out into the paved park, or into the parallel parking area, and trying to create more room for tree growth, and essentially allowing you to also expand the sidewalk down Main Street, which is heavily traveled. Look at this option. It is extremely important to note that you would probably lose, based on our exhibits and layouts, you would lose approximately one on-street parking per side per block. So if you're looking at both sides of the street, it would be 2 per block. Option C was, we know parking is a hot commodity in downtown. Option C was essentially in areas that are hatched out, we would move those into the roadway, but we would not lose any parking. So you'd have a hybrid approach of the trees where they are today, or in the hatched areas where we're transitioning turn lanes. So we wanted to throw in 2 other options, which is option D and E. D is if we're really looking to change the original vision or the original direction that we got, we're happy to do that. But we would probably need to take that through more of a process to engage you on different concepts and options. And we'd probably want to get a designer on board, a landscape architect, or streetscape consultant on board to help facilitate that, create renderings, and make sure we're getting buy-in not only from you guys, from the downtown associations, and all residents of Franklin. And then option E was, if we're not advocating for this, but it's always an option, that if the scope is growing too much, does it need to be re-voted on by the board and put back into that capital funding process? And so, at this point, we're happy to do whatever the board's wishes are, and certainly want to implement those, but we're really looking for your clear direction on that. So as it relates to cost, option concept A, William and myself, we went back and looked at the budget. We feel that the original number that we gave you to simply remove pavers and replace them, that means we're not ripping out sidewalk, we're not ripping out curb and gutter, we're not ripping out all the trees and redoing it, simply replacing the pavers there. We still feel that doing that on a block-by-block basis, our original estimate, will cover us at $2.2 million. Option B and C, when you start getting out into the roadway, you start messing with curb and gutter, you're going to be pouring back additional sidewalk, you're going to run into utility issues, you're going to have to move storm, you're going to have to do some paving. It's a little bit more in depth. We would try to be to make the project as simple and keep the impacts down as much as possible. But in option B and C, with those complications, we would probably need to go ahead and at least do some survey and some design, and we believe those costs would creep up to about $3.5 to $4 million. Again, there's a lot of logic in looking at B and C, but it was not what we had originally anticipated when we were looking at these projects. And then option D would be really to try to go through, working with our streetscape consultant. We don't know what that cost would be. We would really need to go through the exercise of, with their help, re-envisioning options on main streets, creating renderings, and trying to get your buyback. And at that point, we could then help estimate the cost. So at this point, we're really looking for your feedback on these. And ultimately, what I'd like to do is, if we feel comfortable and there's no other options you want us to explore, is to bring this back through a resolution to get that clear direction from the board.
The other thing, just to tag onto that financial impact piece, we are in the midst of updating the financial model that supports the capital investment program. I would say if you want us to look at something in the range of what B and C is at additional cost, we can integrate that into that new model and show you what that looks like. That certainly can be done, and that can influence your decision as well. And And the way this was also originally structured, especially on A, that was over multiple years, that's spread out. It seems to me B and C might need to be a little more concentrated in a time period, but
Yes.
yeah, so it would be a little different project structure to it, because the original concept A was really to just chip away block by block, do it over time, and spread that cost accordingly as well.
Well, I think if it's okay, we'll just kind of go round robin and let people kind of have a first blush. That doesn't mean that, but it may give some indication which direction we want to go, so. Alderman Speedy? Short
Wake
timer.
up.
You get
I
to
guess
go.
we're going B or C. Then we need to go back to the capital process to vote on this, to improve it. I'm not probably the right person to ask about moving trees and making things pretty, so.
Alderman Martin? And you can make a comment if you like.
There have been, there's been so much interest in this, and I've had so many people contact me about it, that I think it's a little bit above us to try to decide. I would advise us to maybe look at a design firm, maybe the original people that helped with streetscape, and see if they would do this design for us at a low cost, since they designed it first, that they might have an interest in following through with this. But I would think that we would need an expert if we're gonna fool with trees and pavers. Now, my paver's been gone for years. I mean, it wore out a long time ago. So I
vote we replace
We-
Margaret's paper.
We found Margaret's paver, by the way. Steve
Yeah.
Grubb found it.
You did find it?
He did
But
find
other
it.
people,
Right after the meeting, too, the next day. He found your paver.
other people are very interested in this, and I would like to see us, if we're gonna do it well, and do it with some design professionals.
In B and C, we would use design professionals. In Concept A, they would help us a little bit with the brickwork layout that would look good, and
Yeah.
it'd be very simple, but B and C is where we'd really have to fully engage. And D would be another one where we'd have to fully engage.
Vice Mayor?
And they did help us with the preliminary layouts as well. Thank you.
I'd like to see them move to City Hall. I mean, this is a place where people walk constantly. We put it back, they're just gonna wear out again. What year were these things put in? 1990 what?
91-ish?
90? And whose program was this?
Heritage Foundation.
Heritage Foundation was not the city's project. I think this Heritage Foundation has to have a buy-in here. They have to partner with the city. If we're gonna do this, they need to partner. They're out raising money all the time. They're doing projects all the time. They need to partner. This was their project. They started this project. They need a buy-in. They need to help the city. I mean, I don't think it's, well, it's their project. They should have fit the whole bill and redone them, but they're not going to do that. And the city's willing to help. Okay, so we need a partnership. We need to go back to the Heritage Foundation and talk to them, and we need to partner with them. And honestly, I don't think putting them back and doing the same thing over again, and 30 years later, they all disappear again. There was one option, I think, you had them on the side where they weren't walking so much. Which one was that? I saw it in here. It was one of the schematics that you had. That might be a possibility, where you could put them on the side.
Yeah, we
right?
would keep them out of handicap ramps, things like that, hot
Right,
pet areas.
Right. So that would be a possibility if we definitely, everybody wanted to keep it. If this board desires to keep them on the street, then we put them there. We don't put them where people are going to walk on them constantly every single day. Because we're going to spend money here. We need to spend it wisely, and we don't need to have the same problem over and over again. I mean, maybe it'll last 50, 60 years. Maybe they won't, but at least 30 years from now, we won't have the same problem. Personally, I'd like to, if we're going to take them up and we're going to redo them, I think we should put them someplace else. I think, well, on the square at City Hall, the new City Hall area, would be a lovely place for them. I think it would be very, very good to highlight it there. But anyway, I think we need to be talking to the Heritage Foundation. I think we need a partnership.
Well, we'll keep going around. I'll say, I think anything we can do to enhance the width of our sidewalk, which to me would fall under B or C or D, I would tend to favor more the B and C personally. I've had a lot of contact about the pavers and how important they are to families and those significant locations that they have to those families. They don't mean anything to us, but they have significant meaning to those families. Alderman Barnhill.
I'm not sure that we don't need to go back and revisit all of the items, or some of the items on the CIP, because when we're going through and we're looking at 2.2 in there someplace, and suddenly it's popped up to 4 million, somewhere in that CIP, something had to be given up. So I'm just looking at the overall picture on this. I won't personally support not putting the pavers back where they are now, okay? That's the only way that I would do that, is to put them back where they are. If we need to rework them, that's fine. Now, the second thing is that I think that we need to really look at I'll be honest with you, I think we need to look at the amount of parking that's on Main Street and be able to use the sidewalk. If we want the sidewalk to be wider or accommodate more pedestrians, we may want to look at what's taking up the space that I'm talking about getting into, and that's those parallel parking spaces on Main Street. I don't know how many there are, 40, 50, 40, something like that. I think we need to look at that, and I think it needs to be a bigger picture than what we're looking at right now. And I'm not sure that the Heritage Foundation is interested in getting back into this. It was a fundraiser. We did our thing. We did our $50, I think, for each one of those markers. And I suspect 1990 or 1991 probably is accurate. So they've been down for 30 years. But if we want to do Main Street and we want to make it more pedestrian friendly and we want to make it look better, we need to look at a bigger picture than just moving a couple of trees and relocating a parking spot on Main Street, a parallel parking spot on top of that. So that's kind of my concept on what we're doing on this right here. I personally think that to put $4 million into the sidewalks and not get any wider sidewalk basically is not a very good use of $4 million. And EG&G was the one I think that designed that to begin with.
They're the ones that have been helping us with this process.
Well, I'm sure they would be more than glad to come back to Franklin. They were delighted to be in Franklin in the early 1990s.
Alderman Blanton.
Well, first off, I love that Margaret calls it, there's been a lot of interest in this. I'd call it passion. And I've heard from a lot of people who feel like there's a new game in town and we're not honoring the old one, and I will have no part of that. So I don't think that's true.
Yeah, and that's not something we
I
said.
agree.
Right.
I agree. I don't think that that's
Any
true.
of
I
us,
just
yeah.
think people, and I agree with that. People, it's their piece of history. And I think it was framed at the time as being a part of history to redo our Main Street. And I think the placement is very important. People chose their spot in most cases. I bought one for somebody for a gift back in the 2000s that's on the square. So I'm with Clyde on that. I had even mentioned to Eric that maybe the tree commission makes some recommendations about what type of trees need to be planted. I'll go back to what I said before. I don't think that trees is the answer to our Main Street. That's not what people come here for. I can see myself supporting B and C, or C, probably more C. But I think after 30 years, things have to be dusted off. And if you're gonna start cleaning, you might as well set it up for the future to be, last longer than it has. Because what's gonna happen, you'll go in there and fix one problem, and then you're gonna have another problem that happens not too much later. Then you run the risk of damaging what you spent so much money repairing. So I do appreciate the streets department bringing this to our attention. And I think, the annual maintenance, I think it's about 50 grand a year they're spending right now. It's not apples and oranges when you look at $2 million, $45,000 a year. but, I think we need to address it.
Alderman Schroer.
I would vote for A, and then I would take Clyde's position after we did A and say, let's relook at how Main Street really looks, and take the time and the effort to look at bigger, wider options that would last 20, 25 years or longer.
Alderman Peterson.
Well, I want to first go back and say, whenever the streetscape was proposed, okay, I'm sorry, whenever the streetscape was proposed, the property owners who own the buildings there were visited by the Heritage Foundation and requested to be a part of it and to actually pay, and it's been a long time since I've looked at this. I think the property owners got a, like a, not a TIF, but I've forgotten something.
Special assessment.
$1 million.
Special
They
assessment.
They created a special assessment
A
district.
special assessment district, and I believe they paid perhaps 40% of the entire cost of doing the streetscape on Main Street. I mean, it wasn't insignificant. And as I say, the Heritage Foundation was a very important part of going and speaking to all of the property owners and convincing them that that would be a good thing to do. So, just to say that first. The second thing is, even though I haven't looked at every single brick, I cannot find the one that has our name on it. And so, I mean, as I say, I haven't looked at every single one, but I've looked a couple of times all down Main Street and everything, to try to find them. But there are some people for whom the placement was extremely important, extremely important. And I think that also needs to come into play. I don't really have, a great recommendation about what we ought to do, but I think we do need to spend some time working on it and get something done, because on some of them, it looks like the thing, the name has been worn off and everything there. And apparently there's not been any information recorded about what went where before. But on the other, and the last thing I want to say is, in going down the street looking, I saw an awful lot of names that meant a lot, not only to me, but to downtown Franklin over the years.
Okay, we're going to go to item 16, which is discussion of possible additional early voting locations. Vice Mayor Berger.
It's been brought to my attention that we have not only the ward alderman up, but the at-large this year, and a lot of people have been asking about having an early voting option. East of Matt Cutcher, we don't have anything except one location. It's all the way down, totally down West Main to the county admin building. So I said, sure, I'll put that on. We forgot last time. Sorry about that. I guess Eric and I both overlooked it. But I think early voting is really important to people. Had a lot of moms and dads with little kids, and a lot of people asked for early voting. To have something east of Matt Cutcher, Berry Farms area is growing a lot since our last election. We have a lot of people down there. We have a lot of people east of Matt Cutcher. So trying to look at something, and I asked Chad Gray about that, and he said it would be up to us to take a look at that. It'd be up to us to decide on that. It wouldn't be too late to put an early voting location in that area. And I do believe that the Elections Commission is looking at 2 additional voting locations for Election Day. And if I'm not mistaken, I think one is down off of Lewisburg somewhere, maybe. Eric, do you remember?
Oakview Elementary.
What?
Oakview Elementary.
Oakview Elementary, where's the other one? can't
I don't know.
remember.
I only know about the one.
I think there were 2 that they're looking at. We'll probably hear from the Elections Commission because they felt that that was being short-changed as well. But they said, as far as the early voting location, would be up to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to put one in. So I just bring that to you.
How does that change our budgeted cost for the election?
I think it's
Yeah, you,
about 40,000.
The existing cost is what, like 50, or 65,000 is what's in the budget.
Yeah.
And that covers basically election day and the provision of early voting at the West Main location for those 14 days. About October 6th through October 21st, I think it is, something like that. The staffing cost for additional locations, from what Chad told me, is somewhere between 10 to 11,000 per site. That's just for staffing. And you'd need to look at if there is a rental cost associated with the facility. There probably would be, because you need it for 14 days. It's not like an election day site where you can get a school that's closed or some of those elements. So it probably has a little more challenge to it. You need to look at what that is, depending on what locations you've got. There is the cost implications. And if we want to request this, we need to do it now, because I think the commission meets, I believe it's September 9th, to finalize. One request that we've made already is to expand the voting hours for early voting to 6 p.m. on weekdays. It had been 4:30, so just kind of going a little bit later allows us to maybe catch some people after work. So that seemed like a smart move, and that's a minimal additional cost for that. So we have already kind of built that in. They will formally approve that on the 9th. But if we want to add a location, we need to ask for it, and they need to work out the logistics in a pretty tight time frame and give that approval at their September meeting. So there's a lot of components to it. I don't know. I'm a little hesitant. I'm not into doing election administration, so I want to rely on their expertise and guidance, and think through, if you do it, where's the best place to do it, or the most accessible or fair place to do it, especially when you have ward elections and our wards are uniquely shaped in some ways that you don't want to necessarily be close to one neighborhood and farther away than another. And I don't know, I think there's a lot to it. And one of the things I suggested to Alderman Berger, and this may happen regardless of what you decide tonight, but we will later this year, first part of next year, look at updating the wards themselves, because we'll get more specific census data. And so in looking at that, you could also look at population distribution and maybe think about, are there locations that help provide early voting more conveniently, and maybe look at how it balances between wards and other locations and those kind of things. But that's not something we can do in the next week or two, but something we could incorporate into that broader discussion as well. And again, you could do that probably either way, but that's something to think about. We just think about balancing the ward population numbers, but we could also think about this component too.
So could we ask them to look into a possibility of at least one early voting location east of McCutcher somewhere? It would be great to have it up and down the interstate, because when people are coming home and leaving and going to Paytonsville Road, you've got that corridor. And people getting off I-65 and going all the way down to West Main doesn't really happen. And that's what people in Ladd Park were talking to me a little bit about it when I saw some people on Sunday about that. So could we just at least go to the commission and ask Chad if he could take a look at that? I had some ideas. Maybe I could come up with something where we wouldn't really have to put some money into. I mean, I think we ought to at least look at who might be willing to do it. If nothing else, maybe for a cleaning cost or something, who knows?
Alderman Blanton?
I just want to say, first blush, I think it's a great thing to work towards. I just don't think that we can do it well in such a small amount of time. I mean, it's no doubt that we have pretty low voter turnout. But I think the people, in my opinion, that early vote, they're intentional about it. And so I think it's a great idea to look towards later, but I just don't think it makes sense right now. for
Alderman
timing for a lot of reasons.
Just real quickly, I think one of the big issues will be is you can't just have early voting for the city. Because if you do that once, and then all the other elections are not city elections, they'd go to that early voting spot and it wouldn't be there. So you're going to have the county decide they want to have, for every election, an early voting
They're
spot.
pretty much doing that now.
Well, I know, but you can't just do Franklin Special. City of Franklin.
But no one controls that but the city of Franklin. That's in our purview to do that, John. If they
So
want to do
we'd have to do
that,
it for every election, though.
they're
that's my
already
point.
looking in fact, they have opened up, if you remember, the early voting has been in different locations. Jed just established new early voting locations around town.
I know.
So that's already been done. So this is in our purview only, regardless of what they're doing.
Mayor,
Alderman Barnhill.
I think that Eric hit on a spot that I probably wouldn't have thought of, and that's in ward versus at large. And I think probably this might work better in a large election, because you're not necessarily singling out one particular ward. I'm not interested,
Fine.
I'm not interested in spending additional money to do something that we're doing now. I'd rather incorporate this, if we're gonna do it, into the redistricting of the wards and the repopulation of the wards. And if we wanna put something else there, then we can, if that's what we desire to do. But I can't see putting early voting in Oakview, which is, that's probably not even in the city.
No,
It's
that's not.
annexed.
That's an election. They're going to put that in election.
Anybody else? Alderman Peterson.
Just one real quick. Does anybody remember, it seems like one time they had some early voting, not for the entire 14 days, but just at a few times somewhere? 'Cause-
They did.
So
They
you
did.
might ask
A week.
them about that. But I think they did have early voting
That's right.
just for some certain days at some places. I mean, I think I remember going to the factory.
It was. There's a few of
They-
them.
That was for county elections, yes, ma'am.
Oh, county elections, okay.
That's right. It
They
was
haven't
like
had that
5
for,
days.
they haven't had that for a city election.
No.
All right, let's be back in 10 minutes.
They can't.
10 minutes.
They